This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
The Beis Yosef in Simon Shin Yud Ches in Orach Chaim brings that there are certain things that it's difficult to know what the actual thing is. You've got all sorts of baths and all sorts of interesting things over there. The Beis Yosef says, we don't have pictures, and because we don't have pictures, we're going to have to be machmir because we just don't know. The Maral, many places, writes that the more a person uses the senses that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him, the more the halacha that he's learning actually goes in, which is very interesting. I showed this slideshow one time to Hagoyim B'Zvil Orbach Shlita, and he liked it very much, and he told me that this is the way to do it, because at the end of the day, when it comes to Hilchos Tefillin, we'll see Be'ezah Hashem, that people, unfortunately, don't know the halachos. Sometimes when people are bar mitzvah, they get like a little share from the rabbi or the shul, wherever it may be, a little bit of the halachos, what you have to do, what you don't have to do. So, sometimes with these things, maybe the rabbi didn't know what he's talking about, maybe he didn't know what he's talking about, maybe the person understood, maybe he didn't understand. It's difficult to know. And many years later, a person needs a little bit of refreshing course. I have to say, I merited giving this slideshow to well over 1,200 people around England, around Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, in different kollels, in different shuls, in different areas, and I can never have a case where somebody doesn't come over to me afterwards and say, wow, there's something that I was doing wrong every single day. Little did I know, I had people who were choshev v'talmidei chachomim coming up to me afterwards saying, I just can't believe it, I never knew such a halacha even existed. So the halachas are something which is one of the most practical and nogeya halachas every single day apart from Shabbos and Yom Tov of a person's life. And therefore it's very, very important for a person to really know these halachas on a very practical way, which Be'ezah Hashem will be trying to explain it over here. Let's go to some of the inyanim of actually wearing tefillin. The main of the mitzvah. So it's brought down in the talk, in Orach Chaim, that how great is the mitzvah of tefillin. That if a person wears them, he's guaranteed a long life. Rabbi says that if you wear tefillin and put yourselves in a talis and say Kriya Shema, is guaranteed a place in Olam Haba. Abaye said that the Eish of Gehenna will not be shaylet, will not affect him. And Rav Papa said that all of his aveiros will be forgiven. Rabbi said, let me ask you, is there a mitzvah that we have that is bigger than this? The rewards in this world and the next world for a simple action of putting on tefillin, which I have to say isn't so simple. We'll see, as we'll see later, that some of the actual Mefarshim, the Pri Megadim and others explain that when it comes to tefillin, you'll find people who don't actually wear tefillin on their heads. They actually put them in their pockets every single morning during Shacharis. And understand, I never saw a person putting their tefillin in their pocket. What's going on? The answer is simple. Because if you put your tefillin in the wrong place, you didn't wear tefillin. And if you didn't wear tefillin, so not only did you make a bracha levatola, which I have to tell you is a very, very scary thing. There's a shari tshuva in Orach Chaim. The shari tshuva writes, Mishnah Berurah brings it in the Sefer. The shari tshuva writes, what happens, and this is so clear. A person wakes up in the morning, or he came to the shin, and he learns how to tefillin. All of a sudden he realizes, oh my gosh, I've not been putting on tefillin my entire life, or at least for the past how many years, in the correct way. What is he meant to do? What does he do? So what does he say? You haven't worn tefillin for the last how many years? What do? So you make tshuva, like everything else. You do something wrong, it's okay. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you, and you do tshuva. Simple. Says the shari tshuva, alright, you didn't wear tefillin, you make tshuva. But what do you do with the bracha levatolas that happen every single day? According to Ashkenazim, there are 2 brachas you make with your tefillin. If you don't put the tefillin in the right place, not only are you not putting on the tefillin in the correct place, and it's as if you didn't wear them, but you're making 2 bracha levatolas every single day. The Vishitas HaRambam, that's an Issa Doraisa. So it's very, very serious. But yet on the other side of the coin, look at the reward. Look how beautiful it is for a person to actually put on tefillin in the correct way, as we'll explain as follows. There's also an interesting Lashon Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi writes there is no greater mitzvah than the mitzvah of tefillin. The Shloka Kodesh brings down that when a person puts on tefillin, right, the Zohar Kodesh also, he's actually being Mekayim 613 mitzvahs at that moment. What a tremendous thing. And the Mishnah Berurah brings what we said previously from the Torah, from the Rishonim, from Chazal, from the Gemara. There's a skula, right? Everybody loves skulas. You go and tell somebody, right, put a red thing around your arm, great skula for horror, this, that, and the other. We'll run to Gedolim and Tzaddikim to get all sorts of brachas. Here, the Torah is telling us, Chazal are telling us, you want a guarantee, you want a skula for a long life, here it is. You put on tefillin in the correct way, obviously we're discussing the correct way, then number one, it's a skula for a long life, and number two, it is a guarantee that the fire of Gehenna will turn down the temperature slightly on the oven over there, Rahman al-Islam. I was proposing that's the reward. One more thing, there's an unbelievable medrash, amazing medrash. The medrash brings down, Klal Yisrael turned to the Rebbeinu Shalom and said, Rebbeinu Shalom, we would love to learn Torah day and night, that's what we want to do, but we just can't. We're under the time, we're working, we haven't got the Kashrus, we haven't got the strength, we haven't got the mind, everyone's got their idea, Peseda. HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned to Klal Yisrael and says, you know what? No problem. Put on tefillin every single day, and I'll make it as if you learned Yom HaMalayla, which I have to add, always when I speak to Bochum, that doesn't mean that you don't have to get up the Shacharis and learn for the rest of the day. Obviously you do. That's clear. But the reward you can see from wearing a simple act of tefillin every single day is a tremendous, tremendous reward that Chazal are telling us. Let's start from the Makar. When does it come in the Torah? So we know we say this pasuk numerous times during the day. Right, that's the makar that we have. That is what tells us to put on the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. So in this pasuk we have the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh, which we'll have to explain. How do we learn from this pasuk all the halachas that are negaya that people have? Better put it this way, put it that way, do this, do that. All from this pasuk. It's all Chazal. It's all what Chazal tell us. So let's explain. Number one, it's a halachic rishonim. How many mitzvahs does a person get? I'll give you an example. You shake a lulav and an esrog hadassim and arobas. You pick them up on Sukkot morning. How many mitzvahs are you getting for that? One. You get a mitzvah of dalad, meaning you have to have a lulav, esrog, hadassim, arobas. That's it. You get one mitzvah. When you have tefillin, is it two mitzvahs or is it one mitzvah? Now don't bring the bracha as a raya, because there's other reasons the bracha that we'll get to. But the simple question is how many mitzvahs? So the Rambam says there's two mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of the shalosh, mitzvah of the shalyad. The Ramban says no. It's two halakim of the same mitzvah. You do both of them, two parts. You do them together. You got one mitzvah of tefillin. Whatever it is, that remains a machlokes rishonim. I'd like just to mention for a moment how tefillin are made. It's interesting. And number two, a person should know as well, you know, they're very expensive tefillin. I think I once made a cheshbon. I made a calculation. How much money does it cost for tefillin? How many years do you get out of it? And how many times do you wear it? Do the math. It comes out, I made the personal calculation of around 10 cents a day. That's what it costs you. To put on tefillin, it costs approximately 10 cents a day, times it by how many days you wear it, times it by how many it costs it. A regular tefillin is $1,000, $1,200, $800, whatever it is, and therefore that's how much it costs. 10 cents a day. Now, in the Maisa, you have to look after your tefillin. They're made in a very, very sensitive way. They cost money for a reason, and if you don't look after them, all sorts of things can happen. So let's just go very quickly through the little bit of the process of the pictures that I took in certain tefillin factories. So it starts off obviously in a piece of parchment, a piece of skin, which nowadays is called gassos, which is the type of animal that they're using that we're not going into. They start to form the batim, the houses that are going to be putting the parchments in. You can see it's getting closer and closer. It's all shaved off over there to make everything look smooth. And we continue the process with all sorts of drilling. Now it's interesting, I don't know if you can see it clearly from the picture, but the picture that I took over here was actually a fellow from England. So this machine over here, the factory that I visited, was a factory that was no electricity apart from a fan that was there because it was very, very hot in the summer here in Yerushalayim. But at the end of the day, there's no electricity apart from the fan and maybe the lights, if I remember. Why? As you can see over here, I don't know if you can see, but they have over here an exercise bike. That they've taken the exercise bike and they've converted it to control the drilling machine on top of the table. What's the reason? Because there's a tremendous inyan for lishma. Lishma means it's done with a human being. If I switch on a machine, it's not really a human being doing it, it's the machine doing it. It's an old China with the machine matzahs and the hand matzahs that we're not going into now. But that is what many of the tefillin places are makpid on. And again, if you're paying good money for good tefillin, this is something one of the hidurim that a person should try to get. Rabbi Yashiv used to get his tefillin from the factory over here that I visited here in Yerushalayim. The shin on the side is then actually pressed on. It's interesting, you can see over here that it's all one piece. And this is very, very important because it has to be one piece. You can't start sticking pieces together, which, by the way, I must add, is a very important thing to remember. You know, when you're giving your tefillin to be checked, and let's say a person tells you, or you notice yourself, that on the corner of one of the corners, it's a little bit rounded. You know, sometimes it gets bashed, it gets banged on the shalyad or the shalosh, and it gets a little bit rounded. Now, the halacha is, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, it's got to be 100% square without any shaila whatsoever. The moment it's rounded, if it looks rounded, it could be a shaila of wearing a possible pair of tefillin. So what do? You take it to someone that does tefillin, and you give it to them and they fix it. I spoke to these people. They told me, you've got to be so careful. We had a case, for example, where the person that gave it in, a Rosh Yeshiva, he gave in his tefillin to be checked, he got it back, they did a beautiful job with the corner, and it looked a little bit suspicious. It looked like an amazing job, and before, you can't imagine what it was before. It was almost like a round ball, and then all of a sudden, it's like this big point over there. Hold on a minute, the halacha is, you've got to add pieces, so what do? So really what you're meant to do is they actually dab the actual leather, meaning they dab the piece, the corner, it expands, because obviously with water, leather expands. Once it expands, they take pliers, they pull it out more, and then they sand it back to place, dry it quickly, and then it remains in that position. So without adding anything, they managed to corner off our tefillin, which is obviously a very important thing when you give it tefillin to know. This bacha, unfortunately, was tricked. What they did was they took a piece of challah dough, literal challah dough, and they put it into the corner, they painted it over with black, and lo and behold, you got yourself beautiful tefillin. Now again, I'm not going into chometz on Pesach. Maybe the guy did have chometz, he didn't have chometz, I don't know. But when it comes to tefillin, there's no shayla. This fellow wasn't yaitza. You have to be very, very careful. Now, I leave all of them to dry, as you can see, and then it continues the process of everything else. We're drilling out all the holes that they needed to do, measuring it. By the way, it's interesting. People think that mashkichim only go into restaurants, hotels, hashkafas, but there are mashkichim that walk into tefillin factories on a random basis, and they check the tefillin. Tefillin is something that a person can actually create, and no one will ever know that it's possible. So the people, the mashkichim, come in and they check to make sure that the measurements are 100% equal, from the length to the width to the height. Everything has to be bidyuk 100% to the millimeter. So all of that obviously is checked, and then the parchments go inside, they're rolled up according to different minhagim, and they get placed inside and painted over to the tefillin that obviously we have today. Now there are all sorts of different types of minyanim when it comes to the ksav, when it comes to the actual parchment that's inside. We have, for example, what most people have of the literature olam is the ksav beis Yosef. Most Ashkenazi Jews have Ksav Beis Yosef. Again, I'm not going to point out here all the differences between them, but just to know there is such a thing. Here is the Ksav Ari, which is slightly different. Again, you can see the slight difference between the Aleph, between the Vav, between the Ches, and whatever it is. Again, that we're not going into now all the details, but those are differences. And then Ksav Belish, which many of the Sfardim have such a Ksav. Lemaisa. If a person has a ksav that he's meant to have, of course that's the best thing. If you have a ksav that you're not meant to have, for example, let's say, for example, you have ksav Ari, and really you're an Ashkenazi Jew, so you're still yaitza, but of course it's better to have a ksav that is actually your own personal minhag that dated back from your parents and your grandparents and everything else. But you have to be careful. We've sent bochum, and we always do this, to go and check their tefillin at least once when they come to yeshiva. Why? Because often their father went to somewhere in Indiana over there, to some Judaica store, and they're selling Jewish stuff over there, and he buys a pair of tefillin, and we have found, I'll tell you, 2 mice that happened to me. Tremendous. We sent one bochum to get it checked. They opened up the parchment. What did they find? They found comics. No, nothing there. It was just comics. Poshet, real comics. This is what happened. Mice number 2 is they opened it up and they found that the tagim, which are the little things that go on top of many of the letters, were actually crosses. That's what they had. And again, I'm not going into now because it's a strict hilchos mezuzah, how most of the mezuzahs, by the way, in this country, little do you know, are actually written by Arabs. But that's a whole different story for a different shit that we can't go into at this moment of time. There was a big bank in Israel, and they opened up 360 different mezuzahs, and I think 2 of them were kosher, most of them were by Arabs, they made them on Shabbos, but that's a whole different story. And again, the ksava person has to be careful, each according to his minig, they get put inside according to the minig of his ancestors. This is the basic tefillin. Right? Everyone knows there's a famous machlokes, even more than Rosh Yeshiva Beis Dovid. There's a Rambam, there's a Taz, all over the place. What does a person do? So most people paskin we go with Rashi, which means most of our tefillin that we are wearing are Rashi tefillin, not Rabbeinu Tam. However, there are differences. For example, as you can see over here, the differences between them are not really in what the writing. The differences is in the order how they place the parashas inside the batim. That's the actual difference between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, as you can see over there. And if you want to see in which one you have, so have a look. This, for example, is Rabbeinu Tam, that you have the gigim, the little strings that are coming out in the middle, whereas a Rashi tefillin will have it over there. Now again, it's a machlokes. Many of the Hasidim are very makpid to wear Rabbeinu Tam after Rashi at the end of davening, just to make sure the Yotze Shita of Rabbeinu Tam, to make sure that, of course, according to Rabbeinu Tam, they don't want to get the Shemayim and say, hey, According to Rabbi Tom's going to come funny you in Shemayim and say, hey, you didn't put on tefillin. So of course, again, people that are machmer, but again, the halacha is like Rashi, and most people wear Rashi tefillin without any shiurim whatsoever. So, let's start now with the actual putting on the tefillin, which is probably obviously what we've all come here for, what we're all going to realize to learn a tremendous amount from the putting on of the tefillin. So, we'll start like this. The Gemara in Yuma, everybody knows, Malin b'kodesh ve'ein b'ridin, right? That means we go up in Kedusha, we don't go down. Which is why, when a person has a choice between his talis and his tefillin, every single Shabbos, what do? So simple. You start with the talis, you move on to the tefillin. Malin b'kodesh ve'ein b'ridin tells me I have to go up in Kedusha. Since tefillin obviously has more Kedusha than a talis, a person has to know that the talis always comes first. So what happens sometimes, and it happens sometimes to the best of us. You wake up in the morning, a little bit tired, you put your hand in, there you got the tefillin in your hand. So what do? So sorry, what to do? You have a problem of what? Aim having al mitzvahs. Aim having al mitzvahs. You can't just put down a mitzvah. You got tefillin in your hand. You have all those people, they're passing around kidneys, passing around challah, right? So each one passes it to the next person without taking himself. I don't know what the heck means for that, right? Aim having al mitzvahs. You have a chiyuv right now to eat some bread. You have a chiyuv to drink some of the kiddush, and you're passing it down to the next guy behind you. I don't know. Maybe it's very cheres, maybe it's very nice, but there's aim having al mitzvahs. There's a serious inyan over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you by mistake pick up the tefillin without realizing that the talis is meant to be first, what do? Of course you put on the tefillin first. Aim be another mitzvah. Put on the tefillin, afterwards you put on the talis. However, I must add, if you happen to be a person that everyone's going to look at and make fun of or whatever, so then you can be makel and put on the talis first. But you have to know what this. If you just passed over the area, says the Magen Avraham, over the tefillin, but you didn't actually take it in your hand, then it's okay, and you can go back to the talis without a problem. But if you've got the tefillin in your hand, you must go to the tefillin. However, on the other side of the coin, we have the halacha like this. Which one comes first? Of the tefillin themselves, the shel yad or the shel rosh? Which one comes first? So we all know we put on the shel yad first. Why do we put on the shel yad first? Because the Torah says to do so. So what happens over here? A person takes out the tefillin, the wrong one. He takes out the shel rosh first. He looks at it and says, oh no, let's put the shel rosh. Aim abin ala mitzvahs? What are we going to say now? Absolutely not. Because over here the Torah was makbid, that a person should make sure to put on the shel yad and the shel rosh for a reason that we're not going into. And therefore if you by mistake pick up the shel rosh, put it down, pick up the shel yad, and put on the shel yad first. That is that halacha. And this is the reason why we see over here, that's the reason why you have to place it in the bag in a certain way. As we mentioned, the shel yad should be removed first. If by mistake not, then you put it down and continue. Putting on the actual tefillin, we'll start with the tefillin shel yad. So, we have like this, the kavanah, and there's many kavanahs that taught the Beis Yosef, all go through our Pirabini Yonis and all sorts of shame of what are the kavanahs that a person has to have when you put on the tefillin. So number one, laniach arba parish. The first kavanah that you have to have is that you are putting on 4 parashas of the Torah and you're strapping it to your arm and to your head. 4, okay. Number 2, Yichud Shemot Yichud Ba'olam HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only one in the world. Number 3, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Nisim V'Liflois. Now I have to tell you, these kavanahs are very serious kavanahs. It could be, there's a shittas habach, in the golden passages this way, that holds that if the person doesn't have kavanah when he's putting on the tefillin, he just, he's tired, he's exhausted, he puts on the tefillin and off he goes, like autopilot. So it could be that he wasn't in the yaitza. Mitzvah strichas kavanah, you need to know what you're doing. You have to have some kind of some kind of das over here. And therefore you have to have these kavanahs in mind. And it's very important for a person to realize, while he's wearing the tefillin, what he's got on him. I always say over, and I said this over in England, so this story actually made it into a couple of the newspapers over there. There's a famous mice in the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. If you look at every Mikrois Gedolos on Chumash, you've always got the Orach Chaim HaKodesh's page. He's one of the tremendous Mefarshim on the Torah. So Orach Chaim HaKodesh was a tremendous Jew. And at one time he saw that his wife was looking a little bit sad. So he said to her, what's the problem? What are you so sad about? So he said, to be honest with you, one day you're going to pass on from this world. Who's going to support me? How am I going to marry? How am I going to buy bread or whatever it is for the kids? She said, don't worry, when I'm going to be moving to the next world, there'll be a man from Istanbul that's going to knock on your door and buy my tefillin. And you should sell it to him for a certain amount, whatever it was, a tremendous amount that you'll be able to live from for many, 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 many years. But you have to tell him one thing, that you have to be makpid not to think or speak any business activity while you have your tefillin on. That's what I did, and that's what I make sure my tefillin also are taken care of. So the wife, what happened, she heard that wonderful, she has a promise of my husband that we do. A few months later, unfortunately, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh passed on to the next world, and as he predicted, a man knocked on the door. Hello, I'm from Istanbul, I've come to buy the Orach Chaim HaKodesh's tefillin. Wonderful. So she says, great, I knew you were coming, I've been expecting you. What took you so long? Wonderful. So he's in the tefillin, they get the money, and she says, hold on a minute, one more condition. The condition is, that the Rosh Yeshiva said, in order to have this tefillin, is don't think and speak about business activities. It's very difficult, that's what you have to do. Put them on for a minute, take them off. That's what you have to do. He says, don't worry, I'm very makpid on it, very careful I do my tefillin. Wonderful. Take the tefillin. And every day he said the kavanas and the tefillin, and it was amazing what he felt, the kedusha, until one day came a time where a tremendous business opportunity presented itself to him. And all of a sudden he started, they started ringing him and they started coming to him and don't speak to me now, I can't deal with it, I can't do it, come back. No, we need to do it now. And he pressured. Until eventually he gave some business instructions. He said after that moment, he didn't feel the same kedusha in the tefillin. And it bothered him. He took the tefillin to be checked. He took it to a sefer. They took out the parchment, took out the scrolls, and they found them to be 100% empty. There was nothing, a word on them. One of the Rebbes, it was a Vishitzer Rebbe, said over this Maisa, it's a true Maisa, and he said that what happens is that when a person wears the tefillin, according to the behavior that he does while the tefillin is on, actually affects what goes on inside the tefillin. And I personally spoke to someone over here, a Ger Chassid, that knows tefillin inside out and checks tefillin for years. He said he's seen it time and time again. People that are hashkafa now are thinking of the right kabbalah during davening, not running off doing this, that, and the other. Their tefillin remains intact in a beautiful way. On the other side, unfortunately, it doesn't. So it's an amazing thing that seems to happen that a person has to realize their kabbalah. Let's go to the position of the shalyat. So number one, we have a Gemara. The Gemara says la'ois al yodcha. What does yodcha mean? So the Gemara darshan is mefurish in menachos, left hand. It's got to be on the left hand. Obviously, if a person's right, it's on the opposite. But the left hand means the weaker hand. Like the Lavush says, yodcha. Yodcha means the weaker hand. Fine, so we put it on the left hand. Wonderful. Where on the hand? So the hand goes like this. We have a bit of a machloikus. Betzim is based on Mishayin. Shulchan Aruch says yodcha means on the muscle. The Ramah says it has to be in the lower half of the bone. Now there's no real machloikus, explains the Chofetz Chaim and the Mishnah Berurah. We try to do both of them. So we have to figure out a place to put our tefillin on both the Shulchan Aruch's place and the Ramah's place. It's got to be on the muscle and the lower half of the bone. How do we do that? So we have over here, right, you can see a muscle over there, it's got to be on the muscle. On the other side, it's got to be on the lower half of the bone, which is over there. So how do we take that practically? If a person would flex, so you have three mekoyos. You have B, which is going to be the most lechatchel, which means you start from the highest point of the muscle and you work down. A over here is out of boundary, absolutely not. Within this amount of space, which we'll see, is a couple of fingers to a person's elbow. You should not be having the tefillin. Now the mice of the Vilna Goyim paskund that B and C are both kosher, which is why the Chofetz Chaim says if you're not sure where to put the tefillin, always make it a little bit higher than a little bit lower. Because worst case, you've always got the Vilna Goyim. You make it too low, and you've got over there, you have a problem. I'll give you an example. Right, one of the Bochum that worked out told me he would like to demonstrate for the Olam, for the Tzvin. As you can see from there, he's got the muscle extends a lot more that way. But he's got it starting from the highest point over there, going down, leaving space. How much space? So we say normally approximately 2 fingers is enough for a person to leave to make sure that he hasn't got his tefillin too low down. If you put it too low down, it's a major problem of wearing the tefillin not in the correct place, like you can see over here. If it's too low, again, if you're making the brocha like that, it's a brocha levatala, and you never put on tefillin this morning. That's how serious it is for a person to go too far down. Right? As you can see from there, it's clearly not the right place. It's got to be, again, from the highest point of the muscle, working its way down. Like the Mishnah Berurah says, higher is always better than lower. Let's move on. B'hoyu hadvarim al lavavecha, says the Torah. Says Chazal in the Gemara in Menachos. What does this mean? Very simple. It means as follows: that the tefillin have to be slightly to the lathe. You slightly tilt them in towards the body, towards a person's heart, and you do that, then you're yotz in the mitzvah like it's meant to be. As you can see from here, slightly tilted in, and that's beseder. Too much tilted down is not good. It's still kosher, but of course, only a slight amount is required over here. This, I believe, is also a point over here. This I gave in a big yeshiva in England. The Talmud Chacham, baby Talmud Chacham, said to me, this slide in particular hit him tremendously. This is a halacha that unfortunately people don't know too well. And that is when to make the bracha, right? So again, we go with the shittas of the Ashkenazim to make 2 brachas, as we'll explain, just to bring up the halachas more. Is over here we'll be making a bracha on the tefillin shalyat. When do you make the bracha? So there's a halacha, right? Halacha everyone knows from where? From, at least everyone knows from Dalit meaning, right? Everyone knows, we're all brought brought up that if you have the esrog, you turn the esrog upside down, you don't take it to the sukkah or wherever you're going to be, you make the bracha, you turn it the right way up, and off you go and start shaking. Why do you do that? Simple. The Gemara says the bracha has to be made over l'asiyasa. Over l'asiyasa means the moment before you do the mitzvah. Not before and not after. That moment. How does it work like today? And this is the mistake. You look around tomorrow morning, maybe you should look around. I stop looking around. You see people, as they're putting it up, they're busy making the bracha. It's not good. According to Mishabura, you never made the bracha, make another one. It wasn't yaitza. The bracha has to be made as follows. Number one, stage aleph is the tefillin has to be placed on the arm, on the correct location, as we mentioned previously. That's number one. Number two, make the bracha. Number three, tighten the knot. This is the order it has to be done. Not in any other way. You find people as they're going, they're busy. No. You have to stop for a moment, realize you're doing the mitzvah, and say, hey, the tefillin put on the right place, stop, make the bracha, and then tighten the knot afterwards, which is the mitzvah. Kashartem means to tie, and therefore that's the mitzvah. So that's over there. Wrapping around the arm. Interesting, in Rishonim it's brought down that the Rosh, for example, wouldn't do it, because he held it was actually a hefsuk between the making the bracha of the shal yad and the shal rosh. So the rosh says, I don't go and start tying all over the place, because it's a hefsuk. Our minhag is we consider it to be a chelik of the mitzvah, and therefore we wrap it around our arm 7 times. It's interesting. Why do we do it 7 times? So we do it 7 times, the Rosh Shulchan says, because it's connected the word Pesach as a necha. That's the reason there's 7 words in the Posek, 7 wrappings around the arm. Now, Mishabur writes, Lechatchila, you're meant to have all 7 wrappings, Lechatchila, only Lechatchila, not Ma'akiv, still works if you didn't, inside the actual arm, which means after the elbow and before the wrist. That means 7 full wrappings should be done from one place to the other place without doing half. Now again, the minhag of a lot of people is to tuck it to a half there and a half there. It's okay, you're yaitza, it works. But lechatchila, to try and do all 7 within the area of the arm, is definitely the most lechatchila. Kashrus shall tefillin tzorich shorshi lemala. Very nice. Tzorich klape pnim. Gemara Menachos. Says the Zohar Kodesh, Omar Reb Shimon Bar Yochai in Parshas Pinchas, that if a person is halachic, the kesher shall tefillin, as we'll see in a moment, we're going to go to that right now. As you can see that the yud has to be close to the tefillin. If a person is halachic, this yud from the tefillin, they'll be halachic him madanei olam haba. I don't know what that means, but whatever it means, it's pretty serious. And therefore, you're meant to make sure that the yud, the knot on the side of the tefillin shal yad, is constantly, even when it's in the bag, touching the actual base, touching the house on top. Now the Maisa, the Avnei Nezer says, even if it's not touching, but somewhere along the lines it is touching, that's good enough. Then you're yaitza with that situation. So a person should be careful. Nowadays they put strings there, they put all sorts of things there, with glue, they have all sorts of pretend to make sure that it's done the correct way. Now there's all sorts of minhagim as well. You can see the Ashkenazim wrap it in this direction, Nosuf Sfard does it in that direction, right? All different minhagim. Again, I'm not going through the Be'alach, I mean, help us discuss this, which one is better, which one is not better. Obviously everyone should do according to their family minhag. Let's move on. This interesting, this is also surprising to many people. We have the tefillin, we wrap it, and then we sort of insert the strap at the bottom. So you'll ask someone, what are you doing that for? They say, what do you mean? It's just convenient, right? Otherwise the whole dungeon is busy, unraveling this, that, and the other. So it's convenient, it's very nice. But let me tell you something. Nothing in Klal Yisrael is cause of convenience, right? Always mention this to the boys, right? Drinking whiskey after the fish course, before the chicken soup. So the bracha is an excuse for any Jew to have alcohol, and therefore off you go. But the Maisa, everyone knows that's not the case. It's a mafurish halacha and shulchan aruch and yodein sebekufta zayin base that you have to have something between fish and meat. So the bracha say, okay, that's the case, no problem. But you could have had water. Okay, you can't, because the Tosfos says you can't have water because it's like You could have had orange juice. All right, why have whiskey? Oh, that's why they taina, because to get the dog chorif, the sharpest thing possible to wash down all those blears of fish before you have the meat. So they're very much on the share of how much whiskey to have between one and the other. But that's beside the point. But I have to tell you, this is also not stam. This is not stam. The Avnei Nezer holds that the Posek says, Ukeshartem lo'ois al yodecha. What's the kshiva? We think it's this. It's actually this. It's the actual knot, which is not really a knot, but it's in the inserting of the strap, which holds it star, which holds it good. It's called the kshiva. And according to some shitas, even the mashmet and the Vilna Gaon way al shulchan aruch, that if you don't do this, could be you weren't yet to the mitzvah of tefillin. because you were never kosher the tefillin on you. This insertion of the strap inside there is not stam, because it's just easy for us to do it. It's something which, according to many shitas, is actually required. But again, if you don't do it, according to Rabbi Posek, you are machmir. Sorry?
You can cut it shorter if it's like...
You can cut it shorter, absolutely. You have to know what material. I'm not going with metal and all sorts of things, because of the misbeah, but of course you can. Now, talking between the tefillin shal yad and the tefillin shal rosh is what the Gemara calls, everyone knows the famous Gemara, by the time we used to go to Mulchama, and the Kohen Gadol stood up, right, the Gemara in Moed the Kohen Gadol would stand up and say, alright, who's talk between the shal yad and the shal rosh? And half the colleagues will get up and start walking out. Like, oh, what's the big deal? But it is. The Gemara tells us also in Sota that it's a very, very big aveira for a person to do that. The shaila is, what about other types of interruptions? For example, what about walking? What about actually being silent? Stop, just looking around, enjoying the Priyas HaOlam outside the window, in between the Shal Yad and the Shal Rosh. Now, Lochel HaMaisa Boysa, Mishna Bruch of its Chaim writes not to do that. You're not meant to have an interruption between the Shal Yad and the Shal Rosh. Speaking obviously is out. Pulling down the sleeve is a major shine in the poskim. If after the Shal Yad is on, you want to pull down the sleeve, or put your jacket on, or your jumper on, before you put on the Shal Rosh. It's a shaila. Many people are makel, and you can be makel, but there is a shaila with such a thing. What happens, again, this is very negaya, maybe not to the olim over here, but to many people that I deal with, is imagine if you're hearing the Kaddish Kedusha, you're hearing Kedusha of Shemini Esra, in the middle of putting on tefillin, you hear the Kaddish Ba'alim Shabbat, also you put it on the tefillin. Now, but sometimes what can you do? No, so you put it on the tefillin, you put on your Shal Yad, you're about to, you put on the Shal Rosh, it's Gaderi, what do you do now? So the Shulchan Aruch says very simple, don't answer, because you're not allowed to answer. Stop what you're doing. If you stop what you're doing, says the Mishnah Berurah, it's as if you answered and you get schar for that. If you did answer, then you have problems. So as you can see, Rov and Posek hold that you have to go along and make two brachas. Reb Moshe had a certain heta that if it's Kaddish and Baruch and Amen Yishmei Rabbah, you shouldn't repeat. But if you hear someone saying some other bracha Shayotza and you answer Amen, then you have to make a brand new bracha on your shoulder. Now, the position of the Shalosh, let's go like this. The Shalosh, also a very tough one. Posek says, Bein Einecha. What does it mean, Bein Einecha, anyway? So we're not going into Tzedukim of actually between our eyes mamish, but we know the Gemara tells us it means in a mokum that I have hair, which is Bein Einecha. And therefore, it's in the middle. Now, does it have to really be in the middle or not? Like you walk around and say, okay, tell the people, that's not me. The Prima Godim says it. The Prima Godim says people are walking around with tefillin on their head, they may as well put it in their pockets. It's not even going to the mitzvah. What does that mean? That means it's got to be 100% in the center. Ad Kedei Kach, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, with the Baruch Posek, so he writes that it has to be exactly in the middle because I need two on one side of my head and two on the other side of my head. It's really, really important for a person to have exactly in the middle. Now, if it's slightly off here and there, it's okay. You should know there were big rebbes and tzaddikim that would never look at a mirror. A mirror is a major shaila. The other day, the Shulchan Aruch tells us in Kufay Aleph that you have a shaila of a yilbach. Look at a mirror is a little bit of a woman's thing to do. But when it came to tefillin, everybody looked in the mirror. We want to make sure that our tefillin is in the correct place. So you can see from there, for example, this fellow over here is doing the right thing. This fellow, unfortunately, has actually missed the boat, and therefore it's a major shaila if this fellow was yotza. Another halacha is the actual height of the tefillin shal rosh. Here the Shulchan Aruch says, where does it go from? Right? Mitchilas ikrei asar, which means from the sprouting of the hair, not from where there is hair. Now I have to tell you over here, it's unbelievable. There are certain times, if you go through Mishnah Berurah, you find certain times that the Chofetz Chaim is poshet screaming. This is one of them. The Chofetz Chaim is screaming. The Chofetz Chaim is saying, Rabbi Nichshalim, but people don't do this. People have to realize that the Chofetz Chaim, they think as long as most of it's above, it's okay, Rubai Kikula, majority wins and all that. No, it doesn't go that way. The entire tefillin from the beginning to the end has to be from where the hair sprouts all the way up. So for example, take this bacha over here. Where is he going to be putting his tefillin? So we have to lift up his head. We have to start from the place over there. From where the hair starts to sprout, that is the marking where the tefillin has to be. Now, obviously, if a person has receding hairline, whatever, so either you go by what it used to be, or you go by Rov and Posek, depending on each situation. Obviously, we're not going through all the different situations at this moment of time. Now, this actually is an interesting shot. I took a picture of this bacha, he was masking, and I had another bacha, who was in Shidduchim. He was an older bacha, about 32. He was in Shidduchim, and he said to me, he came to me with a terrible sorrows. He said he's got hair similar to this, but much worse. He's only got a piece here, and he has to pull it over, and that's his hair. So he says he doesn't mind doing that, but when it comes to tefillin, there's a halacha, that the tefillin has to be put on something that's in its place. The hair that he puts over is not in its place. And if it's not in its place, there is a major shaila. I don't want to go into details right now, but there is a shaila that a person should just realize hair is meant to be in its regular place, and therefore not a shaila of a chatzitza. We'll get back to long hair in a moment. What about the kesher at the back of the tefillin? So the Gemara tells us, kesher of tefillin, so shel mala, in order that Yisrael should be the mala. That's what we want. So there's two conditions over here. Number one, there has to be the correct height. Number two, it's got to be the correct position. If you have a combination of both, then you have kosher tefillin. If you're missing one or the other, then what you're wearing is not really tefillin and you're not yaitza. So here, for example, we take the guidance of the Rabbi Shalom's guf that he created, is we have what the Mishabura says, the end place where the skull starts sloping down, right? It's an amazing thing, this one. You start, it's like, for example, when I give the halachas of haircuts and where the haircut has to be and where a person shaves until. So there's all sorts of shilas of where the bone is and whatever. So everyone's looking to try and find the bone over there. So that's not today's discussion. But here we have to find this bone over here. So the person takes the skull from all the way high up and he goes down and it starts to get soft. So from that place is the place where his kesher, the knot on the back of his finishal rosh, should be situated. In that case. Now, let's go on completely. Normally, it's actually opposite the eyes. People think it's much lower. But the truth is, it's actually opposite a person's eyes. What's where the kesher shel tefillin has to be, as you can see from over there. Person put it too low opposite the neck. It could be it wasn't yaitza, and it's a major problem. A person over here, for example, again, it has to be in a place where there's hair. In a place over the hair, and it's also okay. That's number one, that's the height. Number two, klapi pnim, says the Gemara. That means it's got to be exactly in the middle. When it's exactly in the middle, then you're yaitza. By the way, most of the times if you finish a rosh over here is good, then generally the knot on the other end will also be good in that way. Now, for example, you have this fellow over here, take him over here, he's doing okay, because he has a kesher that's exactly in the middle here, which means that the top over there is also going to be good. Unfortunately, this fellow needs his straps adjusting by a professional, how to do it, to make sure that everything's right. It's a shaila of apostle. Now, Rabbi side. Another interesting question. The bracha. Again, shitas Ashkenazim, not the Sfardim, but the Ashkenazim make two brachas on the tefillin. One on the shalyad, one on the shalosh. What is this bracha on the shalosh? Let me ask you. Before we discuss when to make it, which is also a big mistake that people make, and that is, what is this bracha all about? You make a bracha, and then you say, Baruch Shem Kavod L'Chusay L'Olam Va'et. Why do you do that? Everyone knows. It's a major machlokes. So because it's a machlokes, really we pass in, you do make a bracha. Just in case, we make a Baruch Shem Kavod L'Chusay L'Olam Va'et. Listen, I don't understand this. And I'll tell you my kasha. I had a shayla like this. Somebody came with the following shayla. It's a very big shayla. You're in the middle of waiting 6 hours after eating meat, right? It's amazing. Take all the other halachas and plug them in. It's just unbelievable. You think of the steak, right? You had Baruch Hashem this afternoon, and we're going to barbecue. Half an hour, 2 hours later, you make a bracha on a beautiful coffee, piece of chocolate, whatever it may be. Sha'afol niya b'dvoroi. You're about to put it in your mouth, you're like, uh-oh, I'm meaty, I'm fleshy, I'm not allowed to eat cheese. What's going on? So what do? So some places will say it depends if it's been more than an hour, less than an hour. So I went to a Chankini as Geshlita. I said, Rebbe, what do you do in such a case? She told me very simple. Baruch Shem Kavod L'Chusay L'Olam Va'et cancels out the bracha. So if it cancels out the bracha, what are you making about the shalosh? You got to make a bracha. So I say Baruch Shem. It's like a steamer. What's going on? So the correct answer really is, apart from there's many interesting answers to this, but the main answer is something which is very applicable to us. And that is, it all depends when you are making this bracha. If you make it in the wrong place, in the wrong time, it's a major shayla. So for example, when should the bracha be made? Here you have 4 steps to making the tefillin shel rosh bracha, for those that do. Number 1, the tefillin should be placed on the correct position. When they're placed on the correct position, meaning around about the area that we said, you stop, you make the bracha, you then securely fix it, and then you say Baruch Shem. And you look around. Most people don't do this. Most people, and you look at the siddur, maybe it's the siddur's fault. Most people will say a bracha on the tefillin, straight away run on to Baruch Shem Kavod L'Chusay L'Olam Va'et. It shouldn't be done that way. Mishabura says if you do it like that, could be you want yaitza, and to make another bracha. It has to be done like this. Number 1, the tefillin on the right position, be'era, approximately. Number 2, the bracha. Then you fix it securely, and only then, which could be 5, 10, 15 seconds later, when it's secure on your head tightly, which is the kshira on the head, you make a Baruch Shem Kavod L'Chusay L'Olam Va'et. Let's move on.
How's it on Sorry? If he puts it in the exact...
Excellent. Because putting it on is not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the kshira. The mitzvah is to securely wrap it around your head. So until you've done that, you've not done the mitzvah. You're right before the mitzvah, because you've got it there. If you're holding it like this and you're making Baruch Atah, that's too early. It's over the over, much too early. It's got to be there. I'm almost ready to go. Make the bracha, bang, do it, and then the Baruch Shem after that.
And if I'm actually put it down in a place that you're not Yotzei,
that's fine. It can be over there also. It can be there, it can be there. As long as it's on my head, ready to go. It means a simple, and I'm done. Whereas if it's over here, it needs a whole mice of putting it on, which is much worse. It's over to over, it's much too early. Which again, is a shaila of a new bracha being required in that situation. Let's move on. Famous Taz. The halacha is, how do you put on the shalosh? So many people have a minhag, and this is how they were taught, this is what they do. They pick up the tefillin shalosh like this, and they put it over their head. So the Taz says it's 100% acceptable, no problem whatsoever. Even though it's not covered normally to hang things, right? You're not meant to hang bed, for example, on a hook. You're not meant to hang your tefillin either. Nobody would hang their tefillin on a hook. But when it comes to being oisik in the mitzvah, meaning when I'm putting on the tefillin and now I'm holding it that way, so then I'm okay. That's not a problem whatsoever, and you can hold it in that way. You don't to the mitzvah. However, al pi Kabbalah, the Shloach Kodesh, the Ben Ish Chai, bring down that a person should try not to do it in that way. To hold it al pi Kabbalah, there is an Indian not to hang your tefillin and to hold it mamish. Now we'll just finish with a couple more halachas. Chatzitza. Chatzitza means, or before we even get to chatzitza, the straps have to be that the Gemara tells us has to be facing outwards, which means the smooth, shiny side on our tefillin have to be facing outwards. Now, by the way, don't think it helps to have both sides of the strap black. Makes no difference. Even if both sides are black, the shiny, smooth side has to be facing outwards. What's very shkiach is on the shalosh. What's very shkiach, if you can see in the shalyad, when you're twisting it around, you don't make the bracha until it's all facing the right way. If you make the bracha when it's not, there's a major shayla if you are yotza. Next, what about the strap over there? So everybody knows the famous Gemara. The Gemara says that if a person with tefillin straps are facing the wrong way, he has to fast 40 days. What a great diet. Halacha Maisa, that's not the case when it comes with straps in the front of a person's body. It's only talking about the straps over there and on the shalyad. It's not talking about the straps that are going over the body, and therefore that's the Seder Gomel for a person to have them. But it is a mitzvah for a person to have them obviously facing the right direction, even the straps that go over his body for the entire davening. Chatzitza, says the Gemara in Zvachim, says the Torah, Al Yodecha. Number 2, Bein Yinecha. That means it's got to be on the skin of your hand and on the hair on top of your head. It's got to be done that way. There can't be anything of interrupting between one and the other. So, for example, says the Ramah, what do we mean? We mean the tefillin itself, the boxes of the tefillin. The ritzuos, the straps that you strap around here and around your head, says the Ramah, you don't have to be makpid. People that have a plaster, a band-aid, people that have all sorts of things in that, whatever it may be, you don't have to be makpid. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, anything that's called the kshira, that's a chelik of tying it to your body, you should be makpid. So there's 2 places that we have to be very careful. Number 1, on the actual head, sometimes a person's yarmulke gets stuck underneath the tefillin shalosh, according to the Mishnah Berurah, since it gets stuck over there, or it gets stuck in the strap on the side, so you have a major problem. Again, it's okay for the Eved, but to make sure that everything is clear coast in the area over there, which is called the kshira. Same thing with the person over there, same thing with the sleeve. Though in your gale, when you put your jumper, you put up your sleeve, so you put your tefillin there, sometimes this chelik of the strap that's going around is on top of a piece of your jumper, which again, Me'ika Adin is okay, but the Mishnah Berurah says that it's shayach to the kshira, a person should be very, very careful. There should be no chatzitzes. Now there's all sorts of other shaylas as well. Big pieces of dandruff, water, sweat, leftover hair from a haircut, and on time we put it on tefillin, stitches, bandages, rings and watches. Again, not going through all the shaylas, but these are situations and halacha in yonim of actually wearing tefillin. Last thing is chatzitza legabi long hair. What do we do, right? So, Baruch Hashem, the bracha was masculine to have. I don't think it's got such long hair, but at least that's what I can find. The Maisa and Poskim say, the Rosh Yeshiva says clearly, we don't know what means long hair. It's very hard for us to say this is long and this is not long. But again, there is a halacha. The Poskim even made. I took a bracha one time to a Rosh Yeshiva Posek during the 3 weeks when you're not allowed to take a haircut. And I told this, I said, Rabbi, this person needs a haircut. Otherwise, I don't know if he's yet to finish. No shy. He's allowed to have a haircut during the 3 weeks, during Tzviyas Oimah. If obviously it's going to be ma'akid his tefillin wearing. Talking and doing other things while wearing tefillin, so as you mentioned, person has to be careful, the kavanis have to realize what you're wearing and what you're doing, smoking, sleeping, eating. Sleeping is a terrible one. You ever saw these people when it comes to tachlon, they put their head down and push it, just don't get up, and wake them up afterwards. You have such people, right? Now, you have to wake up such a person. Because there's a shayla, Hashem Yafich, a person will pass wind when he's wearing the tefillin. By the way, the poskim, the achroinim, the gedolim say that passing wind while a person wearing tefillin is worse than actually dropping the tefillin on the floor. It's very, very serious. A person should take off a tefillin for that moment and put it back again. Right? Wouldn't have to make a new bracha. Smoking, eating, all of these things, but etzem mikadel avadim is mutar, no shayla. But again, it fits into the situation of the person has to realize what is he doing with his tefillin. You know, in the olden days, they used to wear tefillin for the whole day. Nowadays, we wear it for half an hour, for lucky 20 minutes, depending on what time of minute you're davening in. Right? So again, you wear it for that amount of time, and you try and do the best you can. No, it depends who you are. Good question, but it depends who you are. If you can manage to do it without all the other Yisroel that are involved, and there's many of them, which we're not going into now, shiurim and all sorts of things, then no, there's many people that I know personally that do it every single day. And it's okay. Now, that's a whole different Indian. Removing the tefillin. So again, there's different times when a person removes the tefillin. For example, you go to the bathroom. So when a person, for example, makes gedolim, partially when you put the tefillin back on, you have to make a bracha. Ketanim, the Mishnah Berurah says you do. When a person urinates, the Mishnah Berurah says you do make a bracha. The meaning of Rov and Posek, because our bathrooms are not like they used to be, doesn't have the same dirt, doesn't have the same sewage system. Therefore, nowadays the person will make it. If a person urinates and takes off his tefillin for a few moments and puts them back on a couple of minutes later, you can be makel and don't have to worry. I mean, there's all sorts of halachos of it. Tefillin should remove standing up. You should remove the shalrosh with one's left hand to show that you don't want to take it off, and all sorts of different halachos removing certain wrappings around the arm when a person does this. There's an actual time that a person removes it in. For example, obviously the best is after Aleinu, after the Kaddish. That's the most halachic because it's finished davening. If you can wait that long, if you can't for whatever reason, Al-Kain, Kaddish after Volitzin, or after the Kedusha of Volitzin. That's the order of preference that a person should wear the tefillin. Chayim Odin and Mashim B'Tefillin B'Chol Shal is a mitzvah for a person to constantly touch his tefillin. That's the meaning of people to touch and kiss their tefillin. It's the yotze of this Gemara. Chayim Odin and Mashim B'Tefillin B'Chol Shal. Now from the Gemara that people, you know, the art scroll would probably say B'Chol Shal means at every moment. That means the whole time. A person should be busy the whole time. The Poskim say you don't have to, otherwise how are you going to daven, right? And therefore you can just touch them at certain times. Say Chesed during Kriya Shema, and other different times that people have a minhag what to do over there. But B'dikas tefillin, checking your tefillin is interesting. The Maisa, we know in Shulchan Aruch, a person is meant to check his tefillin at least twice in 7 years. Whatever, maybe many people have a minhag to it every single Elul. People do it by Shmita year. There's all sorts of minhagim. The Maisa, if a person had his tefillin checked properly, he knows that they're good, and he knows that he looked after them properly, meaning they weren't put into the sun, they weren't left in the rain, and whatever goes along together with that, then he could be making, and for many years later, you don't have to check your tefillin. You should check with the sofer that checks them to make sure that this is correct by your tefillin, that your tefillin are the type that can actually cope with waiting 10 to 15 years. I know the last time I checked my tefillin was about a number of years, and the sofer said to me, don't check it another 15 years, it's not good to open it up, it's not good for the tefillin, and therefore if you keep good care of it, you don't even have to check it over there. I just want to mention, if I may, one last Maisa, which I read, a tremendous Maisa, and just before we finish, just give me 2 minutes. Rabbi Yosef Wallace is the director of Arichim of Israel, if anybody knows. So he gave a talk to Project Witness, and he said the following story, which I think really touched my heart, which I think will help you tremendously. So he was his parents were in a concentration camp, in a concentration camp, and there was a Jew that was being taken to his death suddenly, and all of a sudden he flung a bag at his father. His father's name is Judah Wallace. He caught it. He thought maybe there's some bread in there, maybe there's something to eat. I haven't eaten for days. And he opened it up, and lo and behold, he found a pair of tefillin. That's very dangerous. To be caught with a pair of tefillin at a time like that was actual death sentence. So he's frightened. So he decided, he put it under his shirt, and he took it to his bunkhouse. In the morning, right before the roll call, while he was sitting in his bunkhouse, he put on the tefillin. Unexpectedly, a German officer appeared, and he ordered him to remove the tefillin. He looked at the number on his arm, and he said, go straight to the general. In front of the general, in front of thousands of Jewish people there, the officer called out Judah's number, and he had no choice but to step forward. The German officer waved the tefillin in the air and he said, dog, I sentence you to death by public hanging for wearing these. Judah was placed on a stool and a noose was placed around his neck before he was hanged. The officer said in a mocking tone, dog, what is your last wish? To wear my tefillin one last time, Judah said. The officer was dumbfounded. This Jew that's about to die, that's what he wants to do, is another mitzvah. So he handed Judah the tefillin, As Judah put them on, he recited the verse, as we say, that we're together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're wrapping Hashem on ourselves. And it's hard for us to picture this Jew with a noose around his neck, wearing his tefillin on his head and his arm. But that was the scene that the entire camp was forced to watch, as they awaited the impending hanging of the Jew that had dared to break the rule against wearing tefillin. Even the women from the adjoining camp were lined up at the barbed wire fence that separated them from the men's camp to watch this horrible sight. As Judah turned to watch the silent crowd, he saw tears in many people's eyes. Even at that moment, when he was about to be hanged, he was shocked. Jews were crying. How is it possible at this time that Jews still had tears? They still had something left in their eyes. Where are these tears coming from? Impulsively, in Yiddish, he called out, Yidden, Yidden, don't cry! With tefillin on, I'm the winner. Don't you understand? It's me that won. The German officer understood the Yiddish, was infuriated. He said to Judah, you dog, you think you're the winner? Hanging is too good for you, it's too quick. You're going to get another kind of death. Judah, my father, he says, was taken from the stool and the noose was removed from his neck. He was forced into a squatting position and 2 huge rocks were placed under his arms. Then he was told he would be receiving 25 lashes to his head, the head on which he had dared to position his tefillin. The officer told him if he dropped even one of the rocks, he would be shot immediately. In fact, this is because it's such extreme painful from the death. The officer advised him, drop the rocks now. You'll never survive the 25 lashes to your head. Nobody ever does. Judah's response was, no, I won't give you the pleasure. On the 25th lash, Judah lost consciousness and was left for dead. He had about to be dragged to a pile of corpses, after which he would have been burnt in a ditch, when another Jew saw him, shoveled him to the side, covered his head with a rag, so people didn't realize he was alive. Eventually, he recovered consciousness fully. He was called to the nearest bunkhouse, was raised, and eventually hid there until he was strong enough to come out. 2 months later, he was liberated. During the hanging and the beating episode, there was a 17-year-old girl who had been watching the events from the women's side of the fence. After liberation, she made her way to the men's camp and found Judah. She walked over to him and said, I've lost everyone. I don't want to be alone anymore. I saw what you did on that day. I want you to marry me. The rest is history. Rabbi Yosef Wallace's parents, they came parents, they walked over to the Klosenberger Rebbe and they requested him to make the marriage ceremony, which he did, and they still have, Rabbi Wallace still has, the secret Tziddik Kedushin, the Shtar, the Ksuba, Adar Yom Hazeh. Rabbi Isai, the Mesiras Nefesh that Klal Yisrael had for Tefillin was unbelievable. Baruch Hashem. We're not put into such trials we never should be. But we should realize the schar and the reward of wearing Tefillin is so great that we should give it a little bit more of concentration, a bit more of an idea to realize what this actually is. Thank you for joining us. And we have also leaflets based on the halachas of Tefillin as well. If you want to take one for free, with the greatest of pleasure.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.